Alright, so Nan here, everybody. I just wanted to talk about a few things, really one thing in particular, and that is the topic of anger. So it's one of those emotions I've been thinking about for a while now that just kind of doesn't fit in with the others. And it wasn't until it was Tuesday, Healthy Gamers GG, their podcast, just released a small little bit on anger and about it, and kind of had roughly the same views that I did, and I guess somewhat answered a few questions that I had at the same time. But this is my take on anger, and yes, it's shunned by many people. Anger is a bad thing, but at the same time, I don't think it is. It's just used incorrectly. And like for a small bit, it's such as saying like, hey, you know, $1 millionth dollars, I'm happy. I'm so happy I'm gonna give it all away, which is not a bad thing. But it would be considered somewhat of an irresponsible thing if you're like, hey, I'm gonna go give it to a bunch of drug dealers to help them, get bigger. That'd be terrible. Don't condone it. But you feel you're doing a good deed by it. Sorry, alarm went off there. But you feel like you're doing a good deed by helping somebody, not knowing what it's going towards. And it's the same thing with anger. If you were to express that anger out in a, let's say, violent way, you would feel, it'd feel good, like, oh yeah, I'm doing something great, but at the same time, you may not be realizing at the time you're doing something really tragic or devastating, but it's very irresponsible at the same time. So you would probably ask, okay, yeah, well then how's a constructive way? A lot of people say, just focus your energy into something constructive with anger, like boxing or rock climbing, or let's go beat up a mountain and go on top of it and conquer it. It's like, yeah, that's great. But I feel like we've lost touch with where anger came from. And from my view, yeah, it's not a bad thing. Obviously, as it's been stated before by others, that I'm gonna close this. Sorry. As it's been stated by others, it was developed evolutionary wise for us to use in a way that benefits us. And yeah, you'd be like, oh yeah, take my food, I get angry, I beat you up. And no, that's why don't we do that today? We'd say, yeah, because we're civilized, but we didn't evolve that way and just still keep anger in. I think anger was brought in as a combination trait, such as when you're so happy you cry. Sadness, it's happiness, and then it's joyous. I think joyous is a combination between sad and happy, if that makes any sense. And I feel like anger was developed out of fear. Yeah, somewhat makes sense, but maybe not for the point that I'm going to. Like, yeah, I'm scared. I'm gonna come after you. I'm gonna get riled up. You're gonna have a bunch of adrenaline pumping, and so people black out and do things, and you'd say, yeah, it's a constructive way to use anger in the correct manner. But that wouldn't be anger. It would be fear with anger, which to me I would see is courage. I think that that's what courage is. People say courage is standing up to what you fear. That's courage. You got that guy shaking in his boots, doesn't want to do this. And the only difference between that and so where does the motivation come from when the guy who says like, yeah, I'm still shaking in my boots, I'm gonna go fight a dragon? I don't think that comes from just being idiotic and going, hey, I'm gonna go fight my fears. That comes from, hey, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of being scared. And it's kind of like when somebody takes your stuff, or somebody insults you or disrespects you or hurts you. Some people back down, and it's either because they're scared or just don't have the motivation. Then you have those people that get angry. And they could get angry for one reason or another, but I think the reason it may have been developed was for courage. Because you have that dragon terrorizing the people, this is just my example, and everybody's fearful, and you got that one guy who's so tired of being scared and fearful that his crops are going to be burned again, or, a tyrannical king or a leader is going to come and take their stuff, or bullies in the neighborhood are going to come, do something. He gets mad. And in his fear of these people and these things happening, and his anger combined, he develops courage. And yeah, I can be wrong. Say what you want down below. But I don't know, that's my take on it. I'm not trying to really drag this out as a long video. If anybody would, everybody, if y'all would like me to get into it, I wouldn't mind making a much longer video on it and looking more into it. And I really just want to look up the definition of, okay, so fear. To be scared, I guess, is what redirects you here. Fear is an intensely unpleasant emotion in response to perceiving and unrecognizing a danger or a threat. Like I was saying before, I think we all know this though. Fear causes psychological changes that produce behavioral reactions such as mounting an aggressive response or fleeing the threat. Remember this aggressive response. Because fear isn't being aggressive. Fear is being scared, at least in my take. Fear in human beings may occur as a response of a certain stimulus occurrence in the present, or the anticipation or expectation of a future threat, perceiving the risk to oneself. It says the fear response arises from the perception of danger, leading to confrontation with or escape from avoiding the threat, also known as a fight or flight response. So I feel like the fight part again is where anger might come in. I'll just keep reading. Which in extreme cases of fear, horror, or terror can be a freeze response, where you get stuck. Your body's just stuck at that point. Doesn't know what to do. Okay, so if you want to pause and keep reading this, you go ahead. It just basically says here, fear is closely related to the emotion anxiety, which occurs as a result of threat or threats that are perceived to be uncontrollable or unavoidable. Yeah. So that's fear. I'm gonna go ahead and just jump on over to anger. Wiki has it as anger, also known as wrath or rage, which makes you wonder what's the difference between these words. I mean, 3 words interchangeably. A little bit more picky on the English language. A person experiencing anger will often experience physical effects such as increased heart rate, elevated blood pressure, and increased levels of adrenaline and noradrenaline. Okay, I guess this is adrenaline with the nor. Some view anger as an emotion which triggers part of the fight or flight response. Okay, remember, fight or flight, that has to do with fear. So now if you have the anger part, you can do the same thing. You can leave, which is, have the courage to leave something where you feel like you should fight. Or have the courage to fight something where most people would walk away. I'm not saying to be irresponsible here, anybody, So, just going through anger and fear. So, anger becomes the predominant feeling behaviorally, cognitively, and psychologically when a person makes a conscious choice, conscious meaning intentional, choice to take action to immediately stop the threatening behavior of another outside force. The English word originally comes from the term anger from the Old Norse language. think them guys might have been some angry guys, or very courageous guys. I guess when anger's mixed in with fear, you're gonna get courage. Read some old Norse tales. You gotta have a lot of courage. And lastly, I just wanna hop over to courage, just so I can kind of put this together. And so, physical courage is bravery in the face of physical pain, hardship, or even death. Seems like a place where you'd be scared, or in the face of a threat, or in the face of a threat of death. It says, while moral courage is the ability to act rightly in the face of a popular opposition, which is what I was saying before, where everybody would run, you don't, discouragement, or personal loss. The classical virtue of fortitude is also translated as courage, but includes the aspect of perseverance, okay, y'all read that, I'm having trouble, and patience. In the Western tradition, notable thoughts of courage have come from philosophers Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and so on. I'm having trouble reading these at this point. I can pass 4-letter words from you guys. Alright, in the Hindu tradition, mythology has given many examples of bravery, valor, and courage. Examples, both physically and moral courage, with the examples of both physical and moral courage exemplified. Okay, so yeah, we hear a lot of the tales, but this really doesn't say what courage is, and that's kind of what I was pointing at. It kind of gives some hints and pokes there, but if you were to take fear and anger and combine them, and you really look at them, that's what I get out of it, and that's where I feel like anger comes in. If you were to just have fear, I think people would act erratically and crazy. And yeah, people still do that. They say they're crazy and courageous, but at the same time, do you run into a burning building because you're like, hey, I don't care if I die, I'm gonna go save some people? You're like, hey, I'm gonna think this out. How would I do this? Can I run up here and do this and get this, and I know I may die? I think it has strategy behind it. I think it's using anger with strategy in the fear of an event. So, let's see what else I can find on courage of the two. The ability to do something that frightens one, strength to face pain or grief, and I guess having that strength, like where would that come from? If you're fearful, something in you has got to push that. So I'd say you have like a downward emotion, you have an upward emotion. The downward emotion inside of like fear is what makes you, cower, run away, leave, and I feel like that would be the same thing as depression. Just, you're not in fear of it because the danger isn't imminently there. It hasn't been seen, you haven't faced it yet, it's never even, been in existence, but it's something you're thinking about, and it brings you down, such as, will I finish school? Will I get robbed outside? Will I go bankrupt? And that causes depression, it may cause anxiety, and I feel like if you combine that with fear, it could cause some negative emotions, such as like people becoming suicidal. Hopefully they don't. But I believe the opposite spectrum of that is when you take fear and implant anger into it, and it gives you courage. Again, you can be reckless with depression, you can be reckless with anger, you can be constructive with depression, try to use that fear and emotion to bring yourself up, which I know is very hard and difficult for many people. Same thing with anger, it's, for most people it's uncontrollable, for some people, they can handle it. But anyway, that's my view with anger. I really had a lot more on my head about it beforehand, but again, if y'all want me to get deeper into it, I definitely will. That's it for now.